Welcome back to our 16th class in the book of Revelation. It's been a while since I made one of these videos. Life kind of gets going, and we had a new plan back, a new phase back in church. So we got really busy with some things, and actually, I've had some time to think and contemplate. I've been in quarantine, so I had a little bit of time to go back and catch back up on things that I've kind of left behind because I've been so busy. So it's really helped me get back to this study in the book of Revelation. And tonight, we're going to look at Revelation chapter 12. And this is the woman clothed in the sun, or the woman clothed with the sun. So the strange, enigmatic thing that shows up in Revelation. You probably think, well, every chapter in Revelation has something really interesting and strange, and this will not disappoint. So it's been a while, so let's go back and recap chapter 11. Let's talk back through what we learned in chapter 11. Really important stuff. In chapter 11, we were introduced to an angel that was to measure the temple. If you remember that, they're going to measure the temple. So he said there's going to be some type of judging or measuring. Are they living holy lives? Is Israel what they need to be? So they're being measured. You get this 42 months in which the holy city would be trampled by the Gentiles. Then we have these two witnesses that show up that are strange. So once again, the measuring of the temple, this angel measures the temple. We have 42 months. That's going to be a really important time period. We have two witnesses that show up. 42 months is the time most Jews associated with temple desecration. This goes back to the intertestament period. Real quick recap. Remember Alexander the Great and his conquest, right? He almost conquers the world. His kingdom, when he dies, is divided between some of his generals, and one of his generals is a Seleucid, and so you have the Seleucid Empire. The Seleucids are running Israel at this time, and you have this really evil king of the Seleucids known as Antiochus Epiphanes. He thinks he's a god, and so he persecutes the Jewish people. You have what's called the Maccabean Revolt. And so there's this 42-month period that's attached to this desecration, this 3.5 year motif of desecration of the temple. The two witnesses that we learn about come to warn of the destruction of the earthly temple in Jerusalem. The two witness motif is also found in Zechariah 4:14. You're going to find that a lot of these things like Daniel and Zechariah and Isaiah are so important in understanding the book of Revelation. The two witnesses have the power to stop the rain. Now think about who did that. If you're at Westgate, we're preaching through this right now. Elijah stops the rain, right? So there's a prophet like Elijah, and there's one that can turn water to blood. Well, who turned water to blood? Moses. Moses and Elijah. And they're very symbolic. When you say Moses and Elijah to a Jew, they symbolize some really important things. They symbolize the two large sections of the Old Testament, the law and the prophets. Also, at the transfiguration of Jesus, think about it. When he goes up on the Mount of Transfiguration, he meets what two people? Moses and Elijah, as if they're ratifying the ministry of Jesus. The two witnesses are martyred in the book of Revelation. They are killed just like the souls that are underneath the altar that we met back in chapter 6. So there's some similarity there with those souls that are underneath the altar. Then John uses Egypt and Sodom as descriptions of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem was now oppressing God's people in practicing immorality. So you had Egypt was oppression, and you've got Sodom being immoral. So those two descriptors are being used to apply to Jerusalem by John the Revelator. The beast that kills the witnesses resembles the beast of Daniel. You can go back and look at Daniel 7 specifically. Look at verses 13 and verses 21, and you'll see some similarity in these beasts that kills, or this one beast that kills these two prophets, and the beast from the book of Daniel. So we know that John is borrowing a lot of images from the Old Testament to help us decipher, right? We need to go back and look at these symbols to be able to decipher what John is saying. The resurrection of these witnesses makes you think of Ezekiel 37, doesn't it? Remember the valley of dry bones where this dead army comes back to life again. The muscles and sinews come back on these skeletons, and they stand strong as a mighty army again. This idea of restoration is coming. So this valley of dry bones and this resurrection that occurs is really symbolic of Israel's restoration. They're calling to heaven. So these two martyrs, they're killed, they're raised, and they're called up to heaven. Harken us back to Elijah's assumption into heaven in 2 Kings chapter 2, verse 11. like I said, at Westgate, we're studying through this right now. We're studying this in our podcasts and our sermons. So this idea of Elijah being taken up in a whirlwind, literally it's a tornado that takes Elijah back up into heaven. So, and we also think of the extra biblical account found in Jude chapter 9, where Moses' body is also assumed into heaven. So these two prophets, Elijah and Moses, were known by the Jews at the time of Jesus to be assumed into heaven. So we see these strong connections here in Revelation chapter 11. So that's a recap really quick of Revelation 11. So now let's jump into our text, into Revelation chapter 12. Let's look at the first two verses. We're going to kind of go slow tonight and look at just a few verses at a time. Revelation 12, 1 through 2. Let's read it together. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. And on her head was a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pangs and the agony of giving birth. So this woman shows up, a woman in heaven. Now remember the Ark of the Covenant, we've seen that before, right? So now this woman shows up. And so who is this woman? You see 12 stars. What's that all about? Sun and moon, what does that mean? She's pregnant. She's in birth pangs. All these are heavily symbolic of things that came from the Old Testament. So before we kind of freak out by all this stuff and go, okay, a woman that's pregnant, and what is this all about? Let's kind of cipher through some of these symbols from the Old Testament. So this passage echoes back to Isaiah chapter 7. Remember, it's a famous passage, Isaiah 7:14. We learned this when we were little bitty. Around Christmas time, people recite this verse a lot. But Isaiah is speaking to King Ahaz, and he's prophesying that this young woman, this virgin, will give birth to a son. So if we go back and look at Isaiah 7:14, it says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Remember, Emmanuel means God with us. So notice the parallels with Isaiah 7. A woman is part of the sign, and a woman that's pregnant that's about to give birth. So we see these two signs line up from Isaiah chapter 7. Isaiah also likened the restoration of Israel. And we've already talked about the restoration of Israel with the valley of dry bones, right? He likened the restoration of Israel back in Isaiah 26:17 like a pregnant woman who writhes and cries out in her pangs when she is near to giving birth. This idea of giving birth to a child, birth pangs, a pregnant woman, is likened to Israel's restoration. So who is this woman? This is a really good question. I don't have all the answers of who this woman could be. I have a theory. And you may think, okay, you've got so much going on here, it's hard to hold it together, but the Bible operates that way. The Bible can have multiple symbols going on, multiple referents, and you've got to read it that way to kind of understand it. Their thought world is not as linear as ours is in the Western world. So for a person that's a Semite, a Jewish person, this would not be difficult what I'm about to tell you. So one answer is this is the daughter of Zion. The daughter of Zion is prophesied back in Isaiah. In Isaiah 66, the ones that return home from exile in the new Exodus, this is Isaiah looking forward in the future, and we know that Jesus is actually the new Exodus, right? Jesus is the one that actually brings the true return from exile, from the slavery of sin. That's what the new Exodus is really. It's fulfilled in Christ. But the ones that will come from the new Exodus, they will be sons of the daughters of Zion, or the daughter of Zion. One daughter, plural, I mean singular. So we will be the sons, Christians are the sons of the daughter of Zion. And we'll get back to that. We'll circle back to that in a minute, what that could possibly mean. There are multiple allusions going on, I think. The woman is represented as Israel, I think, giving birth to the Messiah. So there's one. The woman is Israel, fleshly Israel, who gives birth to Messiah Jesus. The woman literally could be Mary of Nazareth, because there's a lot of people, because of anti-Catholic feelings and things like that, will write this off and go, well, it's not talking about Mary. It can't talk about Mary because then you're going to elevate Mary to a high place. Well, when you do that, that's really bad biblical interpretation. Yes, you'll see some things here that actually apply to Mary. And think about it. Now, Mary represents Israel. She is a Jewish woman, right? She is giving birth. The Messiah, the Savior of the world, is going to come through the womb of a literal Jewish woman. So she, in some ways, embodies Israel. In some ways, she's the opposite of Eve, right? Eve, the mother of the living, is disobedient. Mary, who's kind of in one sense the mother of the new living, the spiritual living, so to speak, says yes to God's plan and makes herself available. So it's kind of a beautiful thing to think about there. The woman is also the church, who is the fulfillment of prophecy, and the church will give birth to those that are saved. Now, we've really messed up because we have these watertight categories. You've got Israel over here, and you've got the church, and they're separate and different. But no, actually, they're God's people. God's covenant people, Israel. And now the church is really kind of the Israel of God. We're the fulfillment of the purposes of Israel back in the Old Testament. Now we're the new Israel. No longer are people identified as God's people around the 12 tribes of Israel. Now it's through these 12 apostles who are identified with Jesus that preach the gospel. Now people are saved by faith, not by lineage in the nation of Israel. And the early church, and this is a lost doctrine, it's one I've learned here recently, looking at early church fathers and what they had to say. And I really give the 2nd century early church fathers a lot of credence because they live not far from the time of the apostles. They live in the culture the apostles lived in. They speak Greek. It's not a language they had to learn in seminary. They understand the teachings of the New Testament. And one beautiful teaching the early church had was the church is our mother, that we are birthed into Christ through the work of the church. Now that freaks people out for some reason in our modern context, like we're elevating the church to some status it shouldn't have. But honestly, it really makes sense that it's within the heart of the church people come to salvation. And that's so weird for our time because we have so much parachurch ministries now where people are being saved outside the context of a church, and they go and find a church family. Back in the first century, it's actually within the confines of church of a church family. You would learn about Jesus. You'd be fed spiritually within a church family, and you would come to salvation. So in a sense, the church, when I think of like the church, the universal church, the church is kind of our spiritual mother. And so that's how the early church saw that. Now, I would ask you the question, who would you rather believe? People that live within just a few years of the time of the apostles, or people today live in the 21st century that have a problem with a high ecclesiology or a high view of the church? I think I'll take the early church fathers is who I'll take. But I'm getting off subject. The woman is clothed with the sun. Now we got to think about that. Wow, the sun. The feet on the moon, and she has a crown of 12 stars. So you've got, she is, and if you've been to a Catholic cathedral, a lot of times you'll see a statue where you see this very thing, the 12 stars and the clothed with the sun and the feet of Mary on the moon. But actually there's a reason for this, where it comes from. It comes from the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, the sons of Jacob, right, the 12 tribes, so these 12 stars represent the 12 tribes. And then in Genesis 37, the sun and moon represent Jacob and Rachel in Joseph's dream. So this is tying her to Israel and God's covenant promises that he made to Israel. That's all it's saying. It's highly symbolic language, Jacob and Rachel, the 12 patriarchs. So in some sense, this is God's people. And then Song of Songs in 6:10 describes the bride's beauty as the moon and sun. Now you may think, well, why are you bringing up the Song of Songs? Well, the Jewish people believed that this was representative of Israel, that Israel was represented by the sun and the moon because of Jacob and Leah. Remember, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. So there's some more background for maybe what John is talking about specifically. So it seems that this woman is pointing toward Israel. So I'm going to give you three things here to hold on to in your head all at the same time, okay? This is not a nice cookie cutter approach. As you probably could tell from the other classes, we don't always have a nice cookie cutter approach, because I think people that say that about Revelation have real trouble with when they say, well, I know exactly what this symbol is, and then you better, boy howdy, you better slow down and tap the brakes. So as you hold these things in your head, think of Mary of Nazareth. Yes, this probably is referring some to her. Hope that doesn't freak you out too much, but I think that's biblical. Secondly, I think it's referring to Israel, but also the church. In Israel and the church, there's kind of this seamless idea that Israel and the church are just God's people within different covenants. Really interesting stuff. So what about labor pains? What's that all about? Well, in John 16, Jesus refers to his passion on the cross as the travail of labor. So there's that motif there, that connection with the passion of Jesus. And also, one would notice it throughout Scripture, Israel and God's people have always suffered. There's always been great travail and suffering of God's people. So could it be that Mary of Nazareth, let me go back and just reiterate this, symbolizes the nation of Israel as a whole? She is kind of like a representative, right? Kind of like when David and Goliath fought in battle. David represents Israel as he comes into the valley of Elah and fights Goliath. Well, in some sense, Mary represents the whole nation of Israel. She gives birth to Messiah, Jesus. And she is a woman of Israel. She is a true Israelite. So here's the cool part too. What we witness here in these stories, or what we're being told, there's like this unveiling. The word in Greek is apocalypsis, this unveiling. And that's what Revelation is called, the apocalypsis of John, the unveiling by John. We're getting the curtain pulled back so we can see the spiritual reality of what's going on the ground. So as we see Mary giving birth to Jesus, we see Herod pursuing the Christ child. We see him trying to kill Jesus. In the spiritual realm, there's a battle taking place. And this is fantastic and exciting when you think about it. What's going on in the spiritual realm is playing out in the physical world. Let's go to the next set of verses here. I've actually skipped ahead a little bit here, but Revelation chapter 12, 5 through 6. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. So let's just think real quick what we've seen so far in this reading. She's going to give birth to a male child. We know that's Jesus, right? He's going to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. That's a prophecy of Jesus being the ascended Lord over all. He's going to be caught up to God in his throne. Think of the ascension of Jesus up into heaven. And the woman's going to flee in the wilderness. And she's going to be nourished by God for 1,260 days. So once again, we get a time frame that's finite. So the woman's flight in the wilderness reminds us of the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus going to Egypt, right? The flight to Egypt. Okay, so in some sense, you're getting all, I know this seems like, okay, you're compressing the whole life of Jesus into just this short set of verses, right? This 30 years of his life into these few verses. But this is how this story kind of operates here in apocalyptic language. So they go to Egypt to escape. Also think of Israel's escape into the desert from Pharaoh, right? Think Moses has to escape also into the land of Midian from Pharaoh. So these escape motifs where God's people are escaping from an evil despot. In Psalm 72, I find this fascinating. In Psalm 72, verses 12 through 14, it compares the defeat of Pharaoh and the parting of the Red Sea to the defeat of the Leviathan. The Leviathan being that primordial beast, right? So that beast is being defeated through the defeat of Pharaoh. So in some ways, Pharaoh represents the evil forces in the spiritual realm, so to speak. And so there's this defeat that takes place of Pharaoh. That makes you think of Revelation, doesn't it? And these beasts that are being defeated in the spiritual realm. So just as Jesus escaped Herod, Israel escapes Pharaoh. So you see these themes play over and over again in the Bible, recapitulate in Scripture. The 1,260 days brings us back to the 42 months and 3.5 days symbolism. So this finite period of time, right? Finite period of time of persecution. A finite period of time where desecration occurs. That's all you need to think about. A time of persecution, a time of oppression, but it's not going to last forever. There's limitations to this time of persecution. We also know that in 70 AD, the church fled to Pella during the destruction of Jerusalem. So there's another example of God's people seeing the signs of the times. Remember in Matthew 24, Jesus gives them all these signs. He says, when you see these things happening, also in Luke's account, you see the eagle standard of the Roman army circling Jerusalem get out. And the Christians get out and go to a city known as Pella. So they escape from the clutches of the Roman army and survive. Let's go to our next set of verses 7 through 9. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil, and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So Satan's being cast to the earth, right? this war and Michael the archangel. When I was a child, I was fascinated with this story. I thought this was the cool. This and Ezekiel 37 were probably some of my favorite chapters in all the Bible. I found them just fantastic as you read through them, like trying to visualize this war in heaven where these mighty angels are fighting in the spiritual realm. I just was fascinated with these stories. And we think of, okay, who is Michael? And this is all biblical stuff. I'm not going to share with you anything that's out there and it's bizarre. But Michael, the archangel, is the guardian of Israel and God's people. Michael may be the guardian of the church. I can't say that for sure, but there's a possibility there. He's always been the guardian of God's people. So Daniel 12, verse 1, we see Michael is going to defend God's people. We have this prayer in Daniel 10 where Gabriel's trying to get to Daniel. Daniel's been praying for a period of time. And he's trying to fight and get there. And so Michael is opposing these other princes or angels in the angelic realm. Michael is the defender of God's people. So it's no surprise that Michael shows up to foil Satan's plot. Satan has this plan to take on the woman, which is Israel or the church. And so Michael shows up to defend God's bride, this woman that gives birth. The earliest Christians interpreted this passage to refer to the fall and rebellion of the angels at the dawn of creation. Let's think about the fall for a minute, okay? So you've got these spiritual beings. Remember we learned earlier that the tail of the dragon swept a third of the stars down to the earth. So you have this, some would say that's a number of the angels that rebelled against God. We don't know for sure. But we do know at some point in ancient history, the angels rebelled against God and Satan was the ringleader. Now we can learn a lot from Jewish history. We can learn what the Jews believed and what the early Christians believed. Irenaeus, being an early church leader and minister, said that Satan fell because he was envious of human beings. Basically, Satan is saying, I'm not going to serve dirt. These guys are dirt. They've been made from dirt and dust. And here I am, an angel. I'm not going to serve these people. I'm not going to help you, God. I'm not going to be part of this plan. And some believe that maybe when he deceived Adam and Eve, that was part of his rebellion. That was kind of his first salvo in the war against God, so to speak. We don't know that for sure. But we do know the Jews believed in the book of Wisdom. Wisdom is an intertestament book. It's not in our Bible. And I'm not saying it's inspired, but I am saying it's really good to read and understand what was the thought of Jewish people in the time of Jesus. This was written before Christ, and I guarantee you Jesus knew the book of Wisdom. I know he knew the books of the Apocrypha because they would have been very popular. So he would have heard these stories. He would have heard them read. And in Wisdom 2:24, in this intertestament book, we're told that the devil tempted Adam and Eve out of envy. That's where Irenaeus probably got that idea from. So that was around in the early church, this idea that the rebellion happened at the dawn of time because Satan and his minions did not want to serve dirt. They're not going to hang out with these human beings. They're not going to be part of being co-regents with these human beings. So they're envious and they bring about this rebellion against God and try to take down God's good plan. So Satan's rebellious. Rebellion happens at some point. Let's go back and look at verse 10. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation, the power, and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. So salvation, authority. Satan has been cast down. When we think of Christ's victory in Scripture, his victory is usually associated with the coming of the kingdom. Go back and read Daniel 7. You'll hear that chapter all the time, don't you, as we're going through this book of Revelation. It's so important. Daniel 7 lays so much groundwork for the book of Revelation. So in Daniel 7, you have this vision of the Son of Man ascending up to the Ancient of Days, victorious. And he's been given dominion and power. So this kingdom is being established. And when this kingdom is established, there's the defeat of Satan. So we see that Satan, of course, is cast down from heaven when he rebels, right? But there's something decisive about the cross of Jesus Christ. When you go back and look at John chapter 12, verse 31, now shall the ruler of this world be cast out. We know that in God's divine council chamber, when Satan sinned, he was cast out. There's this idea of the divine council. You see it in places like Job chapter 1 and Zechariah chapter 3, verse 1, that God holds court And so these spirits come before God, and there's this council that takes place. There's an interesting story of Micaiah, the prophet, and I think it's 1 Kings 22, talks about this divine council chamber. This really, go read that story sometimes in 1 Kings 22. It'll blow you away. It's a really interesting story. But you have this divine council chamber where the spirits present themselves before the Almighty God. And so Satan would come before the Lord. And so there's this idea of Satan being cast out. And Jesus says in John 12:31 that now shall the ruler of this earth be cast down. Remember when Jesus sends out the 70, they say, Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning through the ministry of these followers of his that are casting out demons. So Jesus is bringing the battle to Satan, and the cross and the resurrection are the ultimate defeating blow against the evil one. So also in this passage, you see the idea of the devil being an accuser or a prosecutor. In the Old Testament, there was this common idea that he stood in the court of God and accused and slandered God's people. So he gets that title, accuser. And that's what John's talking about here. Let's look at verses 11 through 12. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. For they love not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So you have these people, these saints. They have conquered by offering their lives. Doesn't sound like conquering, does it, to us? Think of conquering, you don't think of being killed or slain. I mean, could you imagine what it was like in the ancient world when people preached the gospel of Jesus Christ? You go into a Roman province and you go, you know what? The God of the universe has had a plan for all people to unify all nations and races. Actually, the Romans have been looking for that, some type of unifying factor. So the gospel comes and says, okay, we bring unity and love and the plan of God. And oh, by the way, God became flesh. He was killed on a Roman cross. The Romans, some of them looked at that and said, that's just rubbish. Now others, that they gravitated to that message of love and compassion, that God had died for us, for our sins. They found that an amazing story of good news. And we're being told to be victorious. We lay our lives down. We willfully die for the cause of Jesus Christ. And that's how these people, this is how they conquer, through their death. They're the opposite of Adam. Go back to the beginning of time. Adam is selfish. Adam wants to be his own person. Adam doesn't trust God. Adam doesn't lay down his life for his bride, Eve. Instead, out of his hubris and his pride and his selfishness, he's not willing to live up to his priestly calling. But we are priests of the Most High God, which is a beautiful doctrine, by the way. We're all high priests of God. We have access to the Father through Jesus Christ. And part of our priestly duty maybe one day is to lay down our lives as a sacrifice for Jesus Christ and for the cause of Jesus, to die a martyr's death. And that's exactly what happened with these people. Just as Jesus suffered and took up his cross, his followers suffered and took up their cross. The heavens rejoice because Satan has been defeated. Now, some see this short period of time. I can't tell you this for sure, but some look at it and go, okay, there's a short period of time between the ascension of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem. Let's say Jesus ascends in 30 AD and Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. Think about this now. The Bible always kind of repeats itself in numbers. Israel wanders in the wilderness for 40 years. How long is it between the ascension of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem? It's 40 years. So maybe the message to the people of Jerusalem, maybe what John is trying to convey to people is, you can make a choice between Egypt and the old way of slavery or the new Jerusalem. And which way do you want to take? The old way of Egypt and oppression and slavery and evil, or do you want the new kingdom of God, the new Jerusalem? Maybe that's the question that John is trying to convey in these passages. We're just not for sure, but that's one theory. So the devil's time to tempt man has been cut short, right? He knows his time is short. He knows that there's a future day coming when he will be cast into the lake of fire. We know at the end of time that Satan will finally be cast into that lake of fire. And so his time is short and he is waging war. The devil has a finite time to prowl the earth, to seek those whom he will devour. And that's what he's trying to do. He's furious because of the short time that he has. Let's look at verses 13 through 14. When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and time and a half. So the woman, God's people, symbolized by Mary, flee into the wilderness for protection. The Exodus is a template, really, for all the various ways that God brings deliverance. Think about it. All through the Bible, we see the Exodus being recapitulated over and over again, God's deliverance for his people. The wings of an eagle is a common phrase used for the Exodus in the Old Testament. So once again, we see this idea of the wings being given to this woman, so this Exodus motif. Now, if we doubted the Exodus is in mind, think about this. She's carried into the wilderness to be nourished. And what does God do for Israel? Israel goes into the wilderness during the Exodus, and he nourishes Israel with the manna. We have other examples where God has done that. Think about Elijah. Elijah goes to the brook Cherith, and God uses the ravens. He has water there, and the ravens bring him food and meat. Then he goes to the house of the widow woman, and she takes care of Elijah. And they have the jar of oil and the jar of flour that never run out. God provides for his people at times like this. And this is when he's providing for either the church or this is some time of suffering for God's people where God is taking care of them for a finite period of time. So God provides for his people is what we're seeing here. Let's look at verses 15 through 17. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to help the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who kept the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. Now, a lot of things here going on here that may seem strange, this idea of water being poured out to flood this woman. There are multiple places in the Old Testament where God's deliverance is described as rescue from floodwaters. Of course, there's the idea of Noah, right? But Moses sang in his song in Exodus 15, verse 12, that it stretched out thy right hand and the earth swallowed them. So the earth swallows up Pharaoh and his army, right? The waters come crashing in and rescue the Israelite people. In Numbers 16, we witness the earth swallow up Korah and his rebellion against Moses. It swallows up and vindicates Moses by swallowing up Korah because of his great rebellion against God's chosen prophet. And this passage seems to be connected to Isaiah 51, verses 9 through 10. Let me read that to you really quick. Was it not thou that did pierce the dragon? There's that beast, right? Was it not thou that didst dry up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that didst make the depths of the sea a way for the redeemed to pass over? So this idea of waters being dried up, waters being swallowed up, and this beast being defeated comes straight out of Isaiah 51. So now Satan turns his attention. This is really important to understand. Satan is going to change his tactic. He tried to destroy the Christ child, right? He tried to use Herod in his plan to destroy the baby children. They fled to Egypt. Jesus was rescued, right? And now he went after the woman. And now he's going after the children of the woman. Now this goes back to that image I gave you of the church being the mother of the saved. These people that come to faith in Jesus, these new Christians, now Satan will turn on them and there will be a great persecution. I was reading earlier today about some of these accounts of persecution that happened in like Lyon, France. And then in North Africa, right before the reign of Constantine, not long before Christianity would be legalized in Rome or given a place of toleration in the Roman Empire. There was a great persecution that erupted in northern Africa. So Christians all over the Roman Empire had been persecuted. And what we learn, what John is pulling the veil back, and he's saying, look, this is not just random chance stuff that's happening. There is a sinister, evil plan. There's a spiritual war taking place. But God will prevail. Even though Satan is trying to destroy God's people, even though Satan is trying to deceive God's people, God will prevail in the end. And if there's anything you learn from the book of Revelation, it's this: we win. Worthy is the Lamb to open the scroll. Worthy is the Lamb to carry out God's plan. We're going to make it. We're going to be okay. No matter if we die tomorrow, right? No matter if they outlaw Christianity in this land and we get persecuted in our own day and time. I think of Christians all over the world right now, Iran and China and other places that are going through great persecution. No matter what the government says, it doesn't matter. God reigns. Christ will be victorious. And that is the message of this book. People get so caught up in all the symbols and trying to decipher every detail, and they miss the main idea. It's pulling all these beautiful symbols from the Old Testament, and over again, God will deliver. God will provide. And that's the message I want you to take from this chapter today. God bless. Thank you for watching this class. And I'll do better. I'm going to start rolling these classes out a little bit more on a regular basis now that we're kind of getting back in the ebb and flow of things with life and church here and all these different things going on with coronavirus. But I'll start working hard to get these videos out in a timely manner. I appreciate you so much watching them. I hope they're blessing you because they do bless me in the preparation. See you next time.